Hi everyone, welcome to the Prime U series of interviews with top business and technology experts. Today I'm delighted to welcome Shahar Azulay, who is co-founder and CEO at Groundcover, a company that built a robust cloud-native observability platform. Shahar, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. So, Shahar, I'd like to start our discussion with you introducing yourself. I believe that many people interested in observability probably heard about ground cover. If you could tell us a little bit more about your path to entrepreneurship. I know that you started your professional career from cybersecurity. So, what was it that drew you to observability?
Yeah. As you said, started with a lot of years in cybersecurity, and then machine learning, AI, and stuff like that. Startups, big companies. Did my share of different stuff in the industry, but the kind of similar part in all that career path is being an engineer manager, basically using observability tools of different from my team, choosing these technologies, working with them from these different aspects. So in a sense, Datadog, solutions like groundcover, Grafana, these types of competitors in the market, I've been using them firsthand. Me and Ches, which is our CTO, and a lot of the people also in the R&D right now. And basically, that's most of the reason of starting the idea of groundcover. Beyond that, I think that observability is a real mission, right? It's a mission critical tool. Everybody's using it. People are opening it daily. They open it in the worst part of their lives, right? In the middle of the night where you wake up and you want to find an easy solution before you go back to sleep. So it's one of these tools that if you bring value, if you help the customer, they're going to remember your name and transfer you from company to company. So it's definitely one of the reasons we like this field so much, even though it's not an easy product to build and it's a very high bar for many standards. It's kind of a real value for our customers, for who I used to be in the past, right? So that's the main reason, I guess.
And what I've noticed that the observability space is becoming really crowded. So there are lots of companies that are offering different platforms, different tools. In 2023, Gartner has predicted in their report that the global observability market will grow to over $5 billion by 2030, meaning there is a huge demand for the tools and for the frameworks and platforms, right? And used to say it's like frequently used, it solves lots of problems. What is it that makes ground cover different and unique on the market?
Yeah, so I think that as you say, this field is first in high demand in a sense that there isn't any company out there almost, right, that doesn't have some observability solution, whether it's a vendor or homegrown or open source. People must monitor their applications or infrastructure in some form. So we're not trying to educate the market of, you've been missing out on an entire field called observability. You've been, shipping your applications without looking at anything you're doing. That's not the situation, but it's actually a mature market with a lot of predefined value and tiers that people already know, like log management, infrastructure monitoring, application performance monitoring, and so on. The main points that groundcover is set out to solve is basically kind of achieving and maintaining that value for a long period of time, because there's different barriers in the market from a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective. From a short-term perspective, it's really hard to get value like tracing, right? It's one of these pillars in APM that we've all been trained to know and trust on. Distributed tracing, OpenTelemetry, all these big words, but the reality is that 9 out of 10 companies out there just doesn't have any of that because it's hard to do. It requires a lot of manual work. The journey never ends. It requires a lot of effort from the R&D and the engineering team. And once you do that, the long-term problem starts, right? You have to send all this data to a vendor or maintain it at high scale. And it's super costly, very inefficient. And at some point, you're going to have to delete all that hard labor and just say, you know what, let's just store 25% of it. And then when you actually wake up at night, wanting that vendor to help you, you're left with nothing, not the data that you wanted and not the data that you intended to work hard for. And that's where kind of groundcover comes in. We work with eBPF, which is a revolutionary technology on how to actually collect the data. So it allows us to basically instrument applications without being part of the code. The entire onboarding is actually really frictionless. You just deploy an agent or a sensor in your infrastructure and log managing, infrastructure monitoring, APM, all accessible in like 60 seconds. And the other one is that we're completely changing the pricing model. We don't want you to work hard to get data that you can maintain, and therefore our architecture is called incloud or bring your own cloud, which basically means that we're storing all this data on your premises, managing it on your premises, so you can enjoy a much more nominal cost, which is much more linear with your compute over time to what you actually do with the data, and not be concerned about these trade-offs all along about, oh, there's a peak in my metric card now. I should treat it and address it this week. So getting data really quickly and very deep with eBPF and storing it completely differently is kind of what groundcover is all about, and that's why we differ with technology, I'd say, from the big players.
Yeah, and you mentioned quite a few things that I'd like to maybe expand a little bit more. So first one is eBPF, right, sensor that you are proudly leveraging in your solution. So if you could, and the second one is your incloud, which is a unique offering which allows at least two things, right? Reduce costs or make the cost of the data predictable, right? And the observability more predictable, right? And also helps with the security. So let's start with eBPF. How popular is this technology?
Yeah, so first of all, eBPF is evolving like fast, right? So when we started out like 3.5 years ago, we had to explain, to end users and to people in the industry what it's about, what we can do with it. It was kind of a question mark of how deep can it really go, right? Can you really replace APM with eBPF and kind of go all the way there? 3.5 years later, it's basically in the core of the cloud providers for a networking stack, right? GCP, Azure, AWS are using solutions based on eBPF for networking. We're seeing it in big security companies as their data collection agent for security. From Palo Alto to Wiz to all these big companies using eBPF for security measures. In observability, we already have an initial offering from Datadog, Grafana. So it's basically this battle has been won, right? eBPF is a really frictionless way to get really intimate data with your application and infrastructure, and I think that this target is moving really quickly. One of the interesting things about it is that eventually the bar is still high, right? It's still a very raw internal technology in the Linux kernel, and regardless of that being open source and maintained by the Linux kernel community, you have to know what you're doing to really utilize it at high scale for things like monitoring all the traces in a node inside a huge Kubernetes cluster, right? To do stuff at high scale efficiently and also make sure that you collect the right data. That's where the secret sauce is. And regardless of the fact that eBPF is booming and selling us more than we're selling it already, it's still a hard benchmark to really accomplish. And the second thing is that groundcover is actually the only one maybe that is eBPF first, right? So if I'm a Datadog, I hear about eBPF, but I'm so invested in APM, which is based on SDK and instrumentation inside the code, then eBPF is going to be just another layer, right? On top of APM, maybe there's some other metrics that you could have gotten with eBPF. Let's just layer it on. We're actually the only company which is actually eBPF first. We rely on eBPF completely. We've built the entire stack from eBPF from the scratch, so we can get that extra value and the deeper information because this is all we do. We trust this technology all the way. So I think we see already eBPF penetrating the big players, but it will always feel like an add-on or another kind of small data layer because they have so much obligation to their other stack, which they don't want to cannibalize, right, and replace by a technology, however revolutionary it is, right? So that's kind of how I see it.
Can you tell me also about the incloud? What type of organization would benefit the most, and what are the biggest benefits of this offering?
So as you mentioned very rightfully before, incloud has two different aspects. One is the ability to basically break into pieces how pricing models would work in this domain, because you used to pay me as a vendor to store your data, and therefore I would take a margin off that and create my entire business model of a single gigabyte you will index and retain on my side, and therefore that's how I'm built, right? I'm used to consume data, and I have complete misalignment with you as a customer. I want you to push in unnecessary logs, right? So I can make money, even though it doesn't bring you any business value. So incloud is, on one perspective, is the way to create that alignment with the customer. Customers already know how to buy compute and store it cheap from the cloud providers. They have, commitment plans, and they know how to do it for at very high scales. And they don't need Datadog or Dynatrace to middleman their storage purchases, and they're already doing it, right, with Prometheus, Elastic, things that they're already storing on-prem. You don't have to convince a DevOps that storing Prometheus on-prem is going to be 100x cheaper than storing the same metric stack at Datadog, right? The only thing they don't want to do is maintain it at high scale because it's not their main job. They're not an observability company. So I think incloud allows us to, merge between these two domains, manage it for you like it was a SaaS component, but keep it on your premises like it was a self-hosted database, so you can get that benefits of the cloud provider build that you know how to do already. That's one, and this is where groundcover becomes really interesting because it allows people to just ship so much more data into groundcover than what they're sending right now to the observability vendor, and therefore get more value when there is a downtime, when there is a troubleshooting issue. You have all the metrics, all the logs, all the traces you need without kind of overthinking about it. And the second piece is privacy. To be honest, as kind of time passes, companies aren't really delighted about the fact that they're sending their logs to or traces to a third party. They kind of have to, right? Because there isn't too much other solutions. We kind of fell in love with the SaaS model, right? It's easy. I just ship it from my agent to somewhere, which was good a decade ago. But right now, with cloud, Kubernetes, and the fact that we can actually run these single tenants and manage them like a SaaS component on your premises, suddenly there's an unlock here of I can offer you the same experience, but I don't have to store the data outside of your VPC. So I don't have to process the data for you. I don't have to risk you of basically exposing any customer data if you're a fintech company, right? So I can. incloud allows us to kind of bridge that gap also, which is very interesting, and you'll be surprised how many companies are concerned about it. Even modern, on the surface, not security super concerned companies are more and more concerned about it and are turning even to open source to kind of avoid that. So that's another great advantage of incloud.
Yeah, and I would imagine that lots of, as you mentioned, one of the cases, a fintech company, or I would imagine healthcare, right, where they are dealing with all the sensitive data and transferring any traces where that all can pose some danger, right, to the data loss, or maybe they are highly regulated and there are certain requirements, right, they need to follow. Telemetry is very popular open source project, and you have just announced the integration, groundcover, and OpenTelemetry, right? Despite the popularity and high efficiency of the framework, it still has some blind spots. And this integration will allow companies to erase this blind spot. Can you tell us about which blind spot we are talking about and a little bit more about this integration?
Yeah. So, groundcover is all about trying to make sure that you have the most value from observability, right off the bat without doing the hard work. But, in some cases, people do want to dive into their code and do want to instrument an SDK like OpenTelemetry to get a specific business value that they want to, specify for that SDK, like a specific measurement of a specific stack inside their code, or, a specific communication transaction that they want to measure even more intentfully, right? Rather than the general purpose of eBPF. So eBPF allows to eliminate blind spot in the telemetry from two angles. One is that you haven't even instrumented that code. It's unbelievably hard to instrument your entire production. So even if you do some of the shortcuts with auto instrumentation, which works in some frameworks, it will always take that the 30% of manual work will take 85% of the time, like any trade-off in humankind. So it will always put you in that position of something isn't fully covered. It can be a legacy code no one wants to touch because that person left the company a year ago, and it can be a third-party component running your production. We all run open source, which we can't instrument, right, as part of our production for proxies and gateways, a lot of different stuff that we run, even service meshes. So eBPF is agnostic to all that. That's their original elimination of blind spot. Regardless of what you chose to work with OpenTelemetry, we will cover everything for you. So you're never concerned about, did I instrument it? Did the guys, did that life cycle? Should I see it in production or not? It's always there. And the second is that eBPF could just go deeper. It's a technology that basically runs on top of the infrastructure inside the kernel. So we can easily instrument things that you can't do with an SDK. For example, we collect the full payloads of the requests and the responses. So if in OpenTelemetry I see an API going from A to B, and all I know is the URL of the API and the latency of that API, in eBPF I can actually see, what was sent between A and what was sent back from B. So it's like imagining two people having a conversation, right? In OpenTelemetry, I just know that, A talked to B and it took a minute. But in eBPF, I can tell you exactly what was said in this conversation. That can sometimes cut, hours of troubleshooting because it's so hard to get. Combined with the fact that we also can instrument that with metrics from the infrastructure and that tied link between infrastructure and application, that allows us to do exactly what you kind of implied to earlier, that we now support a full mesh between eBPF and OpenTelemetry for our customers. So eBPF is always running on the background. If you do have OpenTelemetry instrumentation on some of your stack, then we're going to take these traces that you send into groundcover, which supports OpenTelemetry, of course, and integrates with it, and enrich them with our eBPF sensors. So you would see these conversations. You would know what's being transmitted. You will be able to connect that original OpenTelemetry trace to the infrastructure metrics that tell the story behind the scenes. And that's going to bring both worlds, the best of both worlds together, because we're not saying OpenTelemetry isn't important. If you put in the hard work of instrumenting your code, we want to be there for you. It's just 90% of people don't, right? So we have to make sure that we have their back. But if you do, then we can bring even additional value with the eBPF stack, and that's what exactly we're releasing this week.
And let's say the customers that would like to leverage your technology, your solution, how difficult or how easy it is to actually have it installed and running.
So basically, it's the enrichment runs automatically once you just change your OpenTelemetry endpoint into groundcover, which takes 20 seconds. You will start seeing the sensor enriching these OpenTelemetry traces. So basically, it's like sending your OpenTelemetry tracer right now to a specific backend and just getting half the value, or just routing them to groundcover, and starting to see a lot of enrichment that we do behind the scenes automatically. So it's kind of a win-win situation for the customer. We're still that OpenTelemetry backend, storing all the traces, allowing him to kind of sift and slice through all these traces. But suddenly, there's an extra value on each of them that you just didn't have before.
So all these innovation, Shahar, at your company, that your company is bringing to the market, is impossible without the people. So maybe we could shift a little bit and talk about your team and fostering innovation at ground cover. If you could tell us a little bit more, like what kind of people you're looking to bring to your organization to be able to maintain this cutting edge technology.
Yeah, so I think one of the values that groundcover has to hold to do what we have to do is to believe that every detail matters, because eventually we're competing with 15-year-old companies, which to be honest, it's not like replacing an old ATM software, right? It's actual great products that dominate the SaaS observability domain right now. So people that we bring in are excellent all across the board and want to make sure that they pay attention to every detail once they implement it. So you can see it in the groundcover brand, you can see it in the blogs we write, you can see it in the product, you can see it in our go-to-market motion. We try to excel and be attentive to details anywhere that we touch, because the competition is so fierce and because we know we have to catch the attention of the customer, with a blazing fast product, with a brand that they can relate to, with a pricing model that they feel comfortable with. So that's kind of what we're trying to bring to the table, and the team we're trying to build. Most of them are experienced in the industry. The team is running fast all across the board, even though it's still a startup. So I think I look for that spark, right, in a person, to make sure that an excellent environment with a lot of people running fast is exactly where they shine, rather than try to find a place to hide. So I think the team is built on that DNA here.
Obviously, you have succeeded, since as you said, that you build a brand that many customers can relate, and you rightfully put it, you are competing in a very mature market with strong vendors, strong. It's great that you can actually recognize this, that it's not all legacy we need to sweep away and just to replace. It's something that you need to add value to the existing kind of proposition. Next thing, I'd like to talk with you about the future observability. Like, what would be your take on, let's say, in a couple of years, where do you see the market moving, and will it be impacted by AI, other technologies? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think that, eventually people the systems are getting so complex that people would want to stop working hard for observability all across the different parts of that, right? So eBPF is one of the initial motions of not working hard to get the data. Incloud is going to be revolutionary, and we see that already in like a lot of different verticals moving into hybrid on-prem kind of architectures. So you're not concerned about privacy and where the data is stored and how you manage it and so on. And AI specifically is also important to kind of get insights from the data, being able to query it at scale without overthinking things that were considered in the past reasonable, like, Grafana is a very unopinionated platform, right? It's a dashboarding platform. You can build whatever you want. I think that customers, because of the complexity and because you're going to have so many stakeholders inside the R&D that not necessarily know how to, do a deep query on their database to, plot on a graph or create an alert, we're going to use AI in many different ways to create shortcuts, bring you closer to insights, collaborate multiple data verticals into an insight for you, and also allow you to basically investigate the data in very different ways rather than being an expert in building an SQL query or anything else that is currently required to kind of dive deep. I think the incloud architecture is also going to be very important in that perspective because as we're going to move there, people are going to use AI for more and more sensitive stacks of basically trying to figure out what is going on in their logs and traces and exactly the same conflicts we have right now with the actual data plane of observability. And you wouldn't want an OpenAI API to include all this data every time you kind of run a query for one of your users about investigating something or querying something. And in incloud, basically, we're already moving. Groundcover is already moving to support AI, capabilities from inside your cloud premises, like any other, solution you can currently consume from your cloud vendor. Why not, query the AI endpoint in your actual VPC, right? In your actual cloud managed services, if you're already storing the data there. And that's always also going to be cheaper, more private, and so on. So I think we're going to see that in AI as well, kind of, things moving more and more to the customer side, privately, cost effectively, not being managed by a third party. So yeah, I mean, Groundcover is working hard on AI from the different aspects, but we're trying to listen to kind of, a year or two ahead, right, of where this is actually going and what's the next problem going to be like, although it's super exciting.
I bet so. Yes, I believe that the industry is moving really fast, and with AI, everything has been accelerated. Do you see also? So I see that you already have the vision for AI, right? And how it's gonna be incorporated into your solution, to your tool and platform. Do you also see that it might become and also a challenge, like the pace of deployment of the logs, all of this, and the adding to the complexity of the systems? Can it also pose the challenge from that perspective, or you wouldn't say so?
I think that it would just open a lot of verticals that people can work with. I think one of the risks in AI is just that some of these features are not going to be mature enough, or they're not going to be reliable as other things that you kind of handcrafted before. But it's going to reduce the barriers in specific things where people are just completely struggling with right now, and the observability companies are easily ignoring right now because they're so used to being a one-stop shop that you can never leave, right? One of them is basically being able to query your data if you're not an expert, and which we talked about. And the second is also migrating, right? Groundcover as a disruptive, vendor would like to lower that barrier so you can easily move from any vendor to Groundcover, even if you have hundreds of dashboards and thousands of alerts. This barrier is gonna be eliminated with AI. So you will have also the freedom as a customer to just shift between vendors and do that, instantaneous move without overthinking of, oh, that solution is so sticky that I can't make the decision, and therefore I have to settle for, hard querying language on my data, and alerts that were built 3 years ago that no one wants to kind of mess with. I think AI will reduce a lot of the barriers there. For us as a disruptive vendor, it's an advantage because we can maybe unsettle the easiness of the current vendors where they're resting right now. Users are gonna trust us easier to kind of move them away into a better experience. So we're going to use that as well for that, right? And I think that right now it's in our advantage, but it's in the advantage of the end user eventually, right?
My last question is, what would be your advice to these companies that are starting to look around for a new vendor?
So first of all, I would say that there's a different way to do things, and the way we price the data is the fair way that things should happen right now, and they don't need to settle for these trade-offs that they're managing daily, which I know is super painful. And I would just recommend them to try out the technology, right? The ground cover has a free tier. We have a live demo. Everything is product led and open for the end users because we know our end users, and we know they don't want to talk to a salesperson to make that decision. So try out eBPF, try out the technology stack itself behind incloud, see how that can bring value. Since it's so fast to try out, then basically you have nothing to risk, but figure out there's a better way. So that's kind of where we're pushing people the most. Just try it out and tell us later if it makes sense compared to your current stack and what you're seeing there. I think the product should speak for itself.
Absolutely. If somebody is looking for a new solution in observability space, just try out, give it a try, play with the technology, and as you said, just see if that brings any extra value to your existing platform. Shahar, thank you so much for your time, for your insights. It's been an immense pleasure to sit and talk to you, and I'm looking forward to having you back sometime soon at the Prime U.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.